Hi, welcome back to Mom in Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat, and this is another episode of Behind the Sessions where I talk about some of the things that people bring up in therapy. And there's a wide range of things that people discuss in therapy, but in particular, in my practice, where I'm primarily meeting with people who are dealing with perinatal mental health issues, it runs the range from issues related to conception, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and all kinds of stuff. One of the things that I see quite often in my practice is people who are going through the process of IVF. And sometimes that's not just once, that's not twice. It can be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rounds of IVF or different types of reproductive assisted technologies to try and become pregnant, or years of trying to become pregnant and have a child through pregnancy in many different forms. What I want to talk about today is something that really rarely gets acknowledged and needs to be discussed, and is the experience of many people, is when IVF or any of the attempts to become pregnant, stay pregnant, and have a baby don't end in having a baby. And I'm not just talking about perinatal loss, which is incredibly important to discuss. More so, what I'm talking about is when there is a person who is full of hope, trying for years to become pregnant, undergoes treatment after treatment after treatment, and the outcome is that there is not a child through pregnancy in their arms at the end of those processes. And for some people, that might be the end of their journey of trying to have a baby, meaning if they're, whether they are or not, moving on to other processes like adoption or surrogacy or any of those things. Sometimes people have to make a decision for their health because of their resources, the amount of time, effort, money that they have put into IVF processes or reproductive processes, that they may have come to the end of what they are able to do physically, mentally, financially, spiritually, and have to make the decision to not pursue having children through pregnancy, through their own pregnancy, and potentially through other avenues. I want to really talk about the grief that's involved in that. And grief is just such a small word to describe the depth and vastness of the feeling that people can have at the end of this type of a process. Because we're not just talking about sadness. We're not just talking about loss of trying to get pregnant, being pregnant, and that experience, but we're also talking about sometimes profound identity shifts. You hear us talk a lot about matrescence and the process of evolving, or whatever you want to call it, into your motherhood identity. But what happens when you are on that road in the process to go through that change, to become a parent, and for years have been hoping, have been trying, have been looking out into the future and projecting out into that there would be a child in your future. And the amount and depth of grief that happens is profound. And there's a complete identity reconfiguration that has to happen over whatever period of time, in whatever way, when you go from trying to have a child to knowing that you are not going to have a child and that is not going to be in your future. For anybody who's been through IVF, they know that it's not just a medical procedure. This is hours, days, weeks, months, years, sometimes, of a full body, full heart commitment. Each cycle carries an emotional investment, financial strain, physical discomfort, hormonal ups and downs, shots, side effects from shots or medications or procedures, sometimes additional procedures along the way to support trying to become pregnant. And there is a roller coaster of emotions and states of mind throughout this whole process. And sometimes very hard to hold on to hope. Sometimes hope is the only thing you have to hold on to. And even if you resign yourself to that this probably isn't going to happen at this time, once it actually happens, once you're actually at the kind of end point of this process, what I hear from people is a sense of disorientation, a sense of walking around in a fog, a sense of not knowing what's next, how to be, how to feel, what to do. And more than that, like, why is the world continuing to go on? This most massive, intense experience has just happened. The end of the process of trying to become a mother through pregnancy and through having a baby has just happened. And somehow the world continues to do what it does. Why is it that not everybody is stopping in their tracks? Like, the world should stop because their world has just stopped. Their world is now going to have to be reconfigured and reimagined and felt through. And there is not a timeline there. There's not like okay, in 2 weeks, I'm going to feel fine. There's not in 2 years, I'm going to feel fine. There's no knowing what the process is going to feel like as you move through it. And I also can't say, oh, you're going to wake up one day and never feel sad about this. The process is the process is the process. And for a lot of people, that depth of sadness lasts a long time. For many people, it feels like depression or is depression. Definitely can turn into that if it wasn't already there because of the multiple losses. If anxiety wasn't already there because of the process of these ups and downs and what ifs and hopes and dreams dashed and all of that. And for a lot of people who've gone through an IVF process, they may have been postpartum multiple times with pregnancies that lasted a week, 2 weeks, 10 weeks, 20 weeks or more, and have been through multiple losses along the way. And then for this to be like this one massive sort of stamp on it being the final time that this is not happening again, I don't think there are words for that. And I'm going to be doing it a disservice because it's not my experience. I'm relaying and describing what people have reported feeling like, what they talk about feeling, the things that we have come to understand in the sessions together about what this is like for them. One thing that rings true across this process, whether there's one IVF or 50, is people go into it believing that persistence will, or continuing the process will eventually bring success. That, okay, I've tried this sort of quote unquote natural route. Now I'm trying this IVF route. And the feeling is that this will definitely result in having a child. And it often does, but not always. And for some people, as I said, even after multiple rounds, a prolonged pregnancy with a live birth and a baby to take home is not what happens. And of course, it's not like you have just one grief, you feel that grief, you feel the loss, and then you move on. Every loss, every round, every roller coaster, it just compounds. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 50, or whatever that level of intensity is for the person experiencing that. And what I can say is there's also a unique burden on the person who's trying to be pregnant, who's going through the process, who's taking the hormones, who's doing the procedures, the list goes on. Because it's happening within their body, it can feel like their bodies have failed. Your relationship with yourself, with your own body, becomes really complex and complicated. And you can't point somewhere and say, when the question comes up, why me? Why is this happening to me? You can't point to something and say, okay, this is the reason for sure. And then that's a good explanation. And that explanation somehow makes you feel better. There may be some understanding or some explanations along the way. And I think maybe at some point, if like medicine is advanced enough to be able to figure out every single time what the why is, maybe that would give some solace, but it's still a loss. You can have information and it doesn't necessarily make it better. It just gives you more context, but it doesn't necessarily take the pain away. And so, what becomes really challenging in a therapeutic sense, in a psychological sense, is trying to not be hard on oneself and trying not to blame oneself that you failed, your body failed, I failed, my body failed, that kind of a thing. Because there's what I was going to say before, along the way, there are well-intentioned people who are saying things like, if you just do acupuncture, or if you just take this supplement, or if you just stop eating X, Y, or Z food, or if you do this protocol, that's what happened for me. That's what I did, and I got pregnant. So you're not only dealing with whatever process you have going on with yourself, with your reproductive endocrinologist, with your partner, if there's a partner involved, there's family members who may or may not know what's going on. And again, well-intentioned, might have some suggestions or things to say that are not helpful. You may have friends that are going through an IVF process and do become pregnant and do have a kid or multiple children while you're still in the process. So you're seeing other people have success getting what they want. You're experiencing from some people good intentions, but also if you're always hearing, oh, you should try this or you should try that, your inner monologue might be, oh, yeah, no shit, I've tried that. Or, no, absolutely, I'm not going to try that because that's whatever. It's outside of my belief system. It's outside of whatever, or it's like not based in science or whatever the reason is. So you're also having to sift through other people's experience of you and your process and your experience. It's a lot. A lot is coming at somebody when they're just trying to have a baby. Like, it would be cool if you could just insulate yourself from everything and then just come out of all of that when there's a baby or when the process is all done. But you can't, because that's just not how things go. But that can be a feeling that people have, is, I want to talk to anybody about this. I don't want to have to make people like feel better about how they feel about my loss. Anyways, there's a lot of ways it can be complex and complicated. But people are only seeing a portion of what somebody's going through internally. Outside of a connected and close partnership, where a partner might obviously knows a lot more about what the person who's trying to become pregnant is experiencing. But there are so many thoughts and feelings that people are experiencing that can be like a constant stream, just going and going, that can be hard to break, hard to have a break from, and hard to stop. Outside of distraction, once somebody is in this long process of revolving grief, they're just kind of part of their background noise. Oh, if it's in the background, if it's not in the foreground, which it often is also. But one other way that it becomes invisible is that there oftentimes aren't processes of grief or ceremony of grief around this, like funerals, rituals, people bringing by food, or other types of support, are really coming in to support the person who's grieving. And not to say that there's not, there are those things that people do, but it's not the same as something that like maybe multiple people have been a part of or understood was going on. People might not even know what is happening or that an IVF process is happening or that there was a loss or a transfer that didn't result in a pregnancy. And then worse yet, of course, is the, well, at least, or maybe just. And yeah, it's like just walking through an obstacle course, an emotional, physical, overwhelming obstacle course. So one of the big parts that's left at the tail end of this process, if you know that your IVF journey has ended, and again, because of any number of factors, the toll on your body, toll on your mental health, toll on your finances, age, safety, all of those things. After the decision to stop trying, which is already a monumental Herculean decision to come to, then if your goal has been to be a mother and that is not what's going to happen, but this idea of being a mother, if that is not there anymore, or that's not something that you can pursue for all of those reasons I listed, it may have been intertwined with your sense of purpose in the world, with your idea about what your future was going to look like, what your relationship with your partner looks like or was going to look like, your identity, who you might be having questions like, who am I now? Who am I going to be? What is this life going to look like? How will I feel fulfilled if your goal was to have children? And those are really big questions. These are existential questions. These are having to reconfigure what your life is going to be when for potentially years and years you had a vision and a hope and a focus. It can feel like the bottom dropped out. You can feel lost. You can feel confused and basically everything. You can feel everything all at once, all the time. And it can also feel like you feel nothing, numb. It's maybe hard to form thoughts, hard to concentrate, or maybe you cling on to work because that's the only thing that distracts you. There's just not one way for people to experience this or for this to have an impact on somebody, but it is profound and it is life altering. And therapy is useful for a lot of reasons. This one in particular is really important. If you are trying to figure out who you are and what your identity is and walk through a lot of the emotional stuff, the thought processes, the overwhelm, the just saying things to your therapist that you can't say to anybody else or you don't want to say to anybody else. That's the beauty of a held space with a therapist. Like, you can tell me whatever you want. I can hear all of it. It can be what you feel like is your ugliest thought, your most thought that you'd be most disgusted to share with anybody else, one that you're embarrassed by, one that, you don't want to feel. Those are things that the therapist who gets it, a therapist who understands, or at least is trying to understand, can hold that space for you in non-judgment, validate your feelings, your process, your thoughts, your anything. Because if this is something you're going through, this is new territory. You didn't expect to be here. You didn't want to be here. The process is one of grief, again, profound grief, of identity shift, of trying to reconstruct your ideas of yourself and your life and move out into the future in ways that you never expected to or never wanted to. That takes time. That takes time. You, in some ways, have to allow your brain and heart and soul and whatever else is involved to be in the process that it needs to be in. It's definitely not about moving on. People around you will move on. People around you will want you to feel better and to not be sad or not be mad, angry. there's a real feeling. But it's about trying to get from a point where, let's say your like level of grief is at 10. It's all day, it's every day, it's all the time. And your level of you feeling like yourself, feeling like you're in a productive, normal part of your life, where the 10 slowly starts to come to a 5, and the part of you that was gone is gone or missing or you can't identify with yet starts to come up, and it comes up to a 5, and you start to balance out a little bit. You feel functional. You feel like the grief isn't everything now. And then at some point you might start to yourself feel like more in your life and more in your process and feel your purpose, feel your motivation in other things in life. And maybe that comes up to whatever, somewhere between a 5 and a 10. But the grief that you have is not going to go to 0. You can't be in the world as if those things never happened to you. It might be at a 1, and there might be times that you feel mostly good and awesome. But what I'm trying to say is that, like, it won't, if it is at a 0, it's not always at a 0. It doesn't remain at a 0 forever. You do still have moments of grief. You do still have sadness. You do still have wishes, maybe even regrets for some people, or at least reflections on how you wished things had gone. But it's such a painful thing that, like, nobody wants to feel it anymore. But you're with the right help. You're waiting for the intensity of the grief to reduce a little bit. You're waiting to be able to feel like you can function a little bit better. And you don't know how long that's going to take. Again, it could be months, it could be years, and it's not linear. No grief process is linear. You don't start at 10 and end at 0 from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's not that type of a process. Grief is up and down and all around, and it goes sideways and backwards and everything. So even though that's there, grief is not necessarily a hopeless process, which might sound like a funny thing to say because you definitely can feel hopeless in it. But even if it's hard to imagine that the worst pain that you've ever felt emotionally could be less at some point, that is what happens. It just does. It doesn't mean that you have forgotten any of your pregnancies or any of the babies that were lost along the way. It doesn't need to mean any of that. If you feel like your grief has reduced in intensity, you're not doing a disservice to the process you went through. You're not pretending as if nothing happened if you do have days where you feel good and great. If we could allow ourselves to be messy in this emotional way and allow other people to be messy in their emotional way, and that it's a process and that at some point it'll feel different, I think that would do wonders to how bad it already feels to go through anything like this. Like, why would we beat ourselves up when we've already gone through a process like what I've described? What a horrible feeling. So the therapeutic process is to try and weed through all of those things, all of those feelings, and get to a place where you can have even the smallest glimpse that life can be meaningful and beautiful, even if it doesn't include your original hope of including your own children through pregnancy. There are many people who are childless not by choice out there. Who can say this better than I can or ever could is that they are out there as a resource. They're out there talking about it, and in many ways may find peace or purpose or direction in their life. It takes some time to take care of their bodies and recover from the years of ups and downs of hormones that they've been through, reconnect with who they are outside of the process of IVF, trying to just go day to day without having this massive goal in the forefront of their mind all of the time. Work on connection or reconnection to their partner, because relationships go through this up and down too. the relationship goes through this process. Finding connection in that relationship or in other relationship can be a big part of moving through and working towards living a different kind of life that they want. It might take some time to reimagine that, to figure out what that could look like, and it could shift and change many times along the way. And that's fine too. All of it is fine. It absolutely sucks, 1,000,000,000%, and it's fine. There isn't something that you're feeling that you like, quote unquote, shouldn't be feeling. If you feel anger, if you feel regret, if you feel sadness, resentment, like anything that's in there, there's probably a reason why. It's probably connected to some real thing that happened. It is a lot to sift through. And it's okay that you feel it, even if you don't want to be feeling it. Doesn't mean anything about who you are. It means everything about what you've been through and what you're going through. So if this, what I've been talking about, is your story or part of your story, there are other people out there who have been through it, and it still can feel incredibly lonely. Your grief is valid. Your feelings are valid. You didn't waste time. You didn't, not in the process, not in your finances, not in your heart, not in anything. You didn't waste time. Your hope was real, your love was real, and it still is. And while your life might be different than you once imagined, it still holds depth. You can still have connection and joy and purpose and direction. And I don't know, I need to get a thesaurus. There's lots of things you could feel in that vein. And I know this is a heavy topic to talk about and to listen to, but it's heavier for people who have lived it, for sure. And it was one of the things that was really on my heart and mind to talk about because of the intensity of the experience and the amount of loneliness that people can feel. I just wanted to shed a little bit of light on it. So if this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who may need to hear it. And if you're somebody who needs the support to navigate through this process yourself, Postpartum Support International has a therapist directory, and there are communities out there for people who are childless, not by choice. So I thank you so much for being with me, and I'm sending compassion, I'm sending strength, and I'm sending space for you guys to feel it all if that's what you need to do. I thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time.